Rudy Carver glanced at the clock on the wall, its ticking the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of the dining room. The diner, once a lively neighborhood favorite, sat empty except for a solitary patron by the window, a gray-haired man picking absently at his salad. Rudy tried not to resent him, but part of him wondered why someone even bothered to come if they weren't going to eat. "For customers, Rudy," said Sarah, his waitress, leaning against the counter with her phone in hand. "We're really breaking records today." Rudy smirked but didn't look up. He focused on wiping the counter with a worn rag, more out of habit than necessity. The truth was, he didn't have the energy to respond to Sarah's sarcasm. "Not today. Maybe next week we'll hit 5. You know, if we're lucky," Sarah added. He sighed, tossing the rag into a bin below the register. "It's not funny." "It's a little funny," she replied, shrugging. Her tone wasn't malicious. Sarah had been with him long enough to see the diner's slow, painful decline firsthand. She joked because she didn't know what else to say. Rudy gave the dining room a quick scan. It wasn't hard to take in the whole view. The tables were arranged neatly, the chairs pushed in perfectly, as though expecting a crowd that never came. He'd tried everything to breathe life back into the place. New menu items, happy hour specials, even catering small parties. But nothing seemed to work. "You ever think about selling?" Sarah asked. Rudy froze, staring down at the counter. "No." Sarah tucked her phone into her apron pocket, giving him a look that was equal parts sympathy and exasperation. "I know this place meant a lot to your dad, but..." "It's not just about him," Rudy cut in, sharper than he intended. He softened his tone. "I made him a promise. I told him I'd keep this place alive." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Well, just think about it, all right? I'm only saying it because I care." With that, she disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Rudy alone in the dining room. Later that evening, after Sarah clocked out and the last patron left, Rudy locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. He stood in the empty room for a moment, staring at the tables, the worn linoleum, the cracked paint on the walls. "Promise him, huh?" he muttered to himself. His father had died 3 years ago, and Rudy had inherited the diner almost out of obligation. It wasn't that he hated the work. He loved cooking, and he loved the memories tied to the place. But the pressure of living up to his father's dream was slowly suffocating him. Rudy descended the creaking stairs into the basement, flashlight in hand. The space below was colder than the dining room, and the air smelled faintly of mildew mixed with dust. It was a cluttered mess, shelves sagging under the weight of old supplies, boxes filled with outdated menus and holiday decorations, crates stacked awkwardly in the corners. He sat down on an overturned bucket, pulling out a ledger from one of the shelves. He had gone through the numbers 100 times, but tonight he was looking for something, anything, that might hint at a way to save the restaurant. The page in front of him was a bleak reminder: negative margins, unpaid bills, dwindling revenue. Then faintly a sound cut through the quiet, a wet, slithering noise like something sliding across the floor. Rudy stiffened, gripping the flashlight tighter. The noise wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. His first thought was rats, or maybe water leaking somewhere. But as he stood and swept the beam of light across the basement, the sound came again, closer this time. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling despite himself. The sound stopped. Rudy moved cautiously, the flashlight's beam shaking slightly as he approached the far end of the room. He turned the corner, stepping between 2 stacks of crates, and froze. A faint glow emanated from beneath the shelves. It pulsed softly, casting ghostly light across the floor. Rudy crouched, moving aside the boxes to get a closer look. What he found sent chills down his spine. A crack in the concrete, no larger than a dinner plate, glowing with an unnatural blue-green light. The edges were jagged, and the glow flickered faintly as though alive. "What the hell is this?" Rudy muttered, leaning closer. Then the sound returned. The slithering noise grew louder, more urgent, and Rudy stumbled backward as something began to emerge from the crack. At first, it was just a slick, black appendage, glistening and curling like the tentacle of an octopus. Then came another, and another, until the creature pulled its entire body through the fissure. It was horrifying. The size of a large dog, its segmented exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian. Multiple glowing eyes dotted its grotesque head, and mandibles clicked rhythmically as it scuttled forward on spindly legs. Rudy's mind screamed at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The creature tilted its head toward him, as if aware of his presence. When it lunged, he acted without thinking. Grabbing a metal pipe from the corner, he swung with all his strength, striking the creature's bulbous head with a sickening crunch. The creature screeched, flailing its limbs wildly, but Rudy didn't stop. Adrenaline pumped through him as he struck again and again, until the thing collapsed, twitching faintly before going still. Panting, Rudy stared at the lifeless body, his hands trembling. Black ichor oozed onto the concrete, pooling around the crack, which pulsed faintly as though trying to draw energy back into itself. The basement fell silent once more, except for Rudy's ragged breathing. And then the smell hit him, savory, sweet, intoxicating. The creature's body lay sprawled on the counter under the fluorescent kitchen lights. Rudy circled it warily, knife in hand, as if it might spring back to life at any moment. The smell, the strange, savory sweetness, hung heavily in the air, making his stomach growl despite his revulsion. "All right, Rudy," he muttered to himself, trying to summon some courage. "Just figure out what it is." With a grimace, he pressed the blade against the glistening black carapace. It cracked easily, revealing a layer of soft, pinkish flesh beneath. He peeled back the exoskeleton, his curiosity overtaking his hesitation. The meat looked tender, almost like raw shellfish, though it glowed faintly in the dim light. Rudy hesitated, the knife hovering over the meat. What was he doing? This thing had crawled out of a glowing portal in the basement. It could be toxic or worse. But then the scent hit him again, richer this time, and his resolve hardened. He sliced off a small piece and tossed it into a skillet. As the meat sizzled, the aroma deepened, filling the kitchen with an intoxicating blend of savory and smoky. Rudy's mouth watered involuntarily. He flipped the morsel, letting it brown evenly before placing it on a plate. For a long moment, he just stared at it. "Well, here goes nothing," he muttered. The first bite was electric. The flavors were unlike anything he'd ever tasted, earthy, rich, with a faint sweetness that lingered on his tongue. It was perfect. He took another bite, then another, until the plate was clean. Rudy leaned back against the counter, his mind racing. He didn't know what the creature was or where it had come from, but he did know one thing. He was sitting on something special. Rudy didn't sleep that night. He stayed up pacing the kitchen, replaying the events in his mind and glancing nervously toward the basement door. By dawn, he had convinced himself that the whole thing had been some bizarre hallucination, a stress-induced fever dream. But when he went back downstairs, the crack in the concrete was still there, glowing faintly. And it wasn't empty. This time, the creature was smaller, something insect-like, with translucent wings and a segmented body. It crawled from the fissure with an odd, deliberate grace, its compound eyes reflecting the light like tiny mirrors. Rudy froze as the creature regarded him, its wings twitching faintly. It didn't lunge like the first one. Instead, it moved cautiously, almost curiously, as though studying him. That made what happened next feel infinitely worse. With a sharp motion, Rudy grabbed a meat cleaver from the counter and brought it down hard. The creature emitted a high-pitched squeal, its body spasming before going limp. Rudy stared at the carcass, his stomach turning. "What the hell am I doing?" he muttered. But even as the guilt gnawed at him, the scent of the creature's meat reached his nose, just as intoxicating as before. It started as an experiment. Rudy cooked a small portion of the new meat, blending it into a simple pasta dish. He tasted it himself first, cautious and observant for any side effects. When nothing happened, no sickness, no hallucinations, he decided to take the next step. That evening, he offered the dish as a special to one of his regulars, a kindly old man named Mr. Harmon, who always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. "On the house," Rudy said, setting the plate in front of him. Mr. Harmon raised a bushy eyebrow, but didn't protest. As he dug in, Rudy watched intently, trying to read every expression on the man's face. At first, Harmon's reaction was neutral, but then his eyes widened. He paused, chewing slowly. "This is incredible. What's in this, Rudy?" Rudy forced a smile. "Just trying out some new ingredients." "You like it?" "Like it? I've never had anything like this in my life." Harmon took another bite, and another, each one more enthusiastic than the last. By the time he finished, he was practically glowing. "You've got something special here, kid. Keep it up." Rudy cleaned the table himself after Harmon left, a faint sense of pride mingling with his unease. The dish had been a success, but the gnawing question remained. What exactly was he serving? Word spread quickly. Within days, Rudy's diner went from a dying relic to the talk of the neighborhood. People came in droves, lured by the promise of something new and extraordinary. The special of the day, which always featured the alien meat, became a phenomenon, with customers lining up outside just to get a taste. Rudy should have been elated, but a part of him felt hollow. Every night, he returned to the basement to harvest more creatures, each one stranger than the last. Some were small and insect-like, while others resembled grotesque crustaceans or squirming, slimy worms. He killed them all with increasing efficiency, his initial revulsion dulled by routine. But the portal was changing. The crack had grown larger, its glow more intense. The creatures were coming more frequently now, as though something on the other side had noticed him. The diner was busier than Rudy had ever imagined. Customers raved about his food, some even claiming it was life-changing. People who'd never set foot in the place before were now regulars, their faces lighting up the moment their plates arrived. But there were side effects. One woman, a middle-aged teacher, approached Rudy after her meal, her eyes wide and unfocused. "I've been having dreams," she said, her voice trembling. "Strange, vivid dreams. Like I'm somewhere else. Somewhere dark." Rudy forced a laugh. "Sounds like you've just got an overactive imagination. Happens to the best of us." But the complaints didn't stop. Other customers reported similar experiences. Whispers just out of earshot, visions of unfamiliar landscapes, an odd sense of detachment from reality. Then there was the man who claimed he could no longer eat anything but Rudy's food. "Everything else tastes wrong," he admitted sheepishly, his plate scraped clean. Rudy dismissed the warnings at first, chalking them up to coincidence or overindulgence. But as the fissure in his basement continued to widen, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control. Late one night, as Rudy cleaned the kitchen, he heard something from the basement that froze him in his tracks. A voice. It was faint, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. Words he couldn't understand echoed up the stairs, sending chills down his spine. Grabbing a butcher knife, Rudy descended cautiously, his pulse pounding in his ears. The portal was brighter than ever, its edges writhing with energy. And standing before it was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. The being was tall and humanoid, its form cloaked in shifting shadows. Its eyes burned like embers, and its voice resonated in Rudy's mind as much as his ears. "You have committed atrocities," it said, its tone cold and deliberate. "You have slaughtered my kin, fed them to your kind, and profited from their pain." Rudy's grip on the knife tightened. "They're just creatures," he stammered. "They're not people." The being tilted its head, and Rudy felt the weight of its gaze. "Do you think life beyond your world is so simple? Do you think yourself a god, to decide who lives and who dies?" "I didn't know," Rudy protested weakly. "Ignorance will not save you," the being replied. "You have opened a door that cannot be closed." The creature, the figure, stood before Rudy, its horned silhouette casting jagged shadows across the walls. The fissure behind it pulsed violently, its light flaring in time with the being's words. Rudy gripped the knife in his trembling hand, but he knew it was worthless. He was staring into the face of something ancient, something beyond his understanding. "You've misunderstood," Rudy said, his voice weak. "I didn't know." "Your ignorance is irrelevant," the being interrupted, its voice resonating deep within Rudy's chest. "Your greed has unleashed horrors upon my realm, butchered lives that would have remained undisturbed were it not for your gluttony." Rudy staggered back, his mind racing. "Wait, you don't understand. It's just survival. I had to do something. My restaurant, my business, it was dying. I didn't have a choice." The being's eyes burned brighter, two molten coals searing into Rudy's soul. "Every choice you've made was your own, human. You killed, you consumed, and you profited. And now the consequences have come to claim you." The floor beneath them trembled, the glowing fissure widening ever so slightly. From its depths came a deep, resonant sound, like the groan of something impossibly large stirring beneath the surface. Rudy felt the pressure in the air shift, his breath catching in his throat. "Wait," he cried, dropping the knife and raising his hands in desperation. "I can fix this. Just tell me how to make it right." The being tilted its head, as if considering his plea. "There is no undoing the harm you have caused. But perhaps there is one thing you can offer in exchange for your continued existence." Rudy clung to the sliver of hope like a lifeline. "Anything. I'll do anything." The being leaned forward, its voice a whisper that cut through Rudy's mind like a blade. "The portal must feed. You opened it, and now it hungers. You will ensure that it is satisfied." Rudy blinked, the weight of the demand sinking in. "Well, what do you mean?" "You will continue your work," the being said, its tone cold and final. "You will serve, and when the time comes, you will know the price of what you have done." Before Rudy could respond, the being stepped back into the fissure, vanishing as the light swallowed it whole. The basement fell silent, save for Rudy's ragged breathing. The next morning, Rudy stood behind the counter as the bistro came alive with activity. Every table was full, the hum of conversation filling the air as customers laughed, shared stories, and devoured plate after plate of his special dishes. The sight should have made him proud. Instead, it filled him with dread. He watched as a young couple at the corner table took their first bite of the newest creation, a tender cut of meat sautéed in garlic and herbs. Their eyes lit up, the same dazed, euphoric expression he'd seen on every customer since his business had boomed. "Excuse me, Rudy," a voice called from one of the tables. He forced himself to smile as he approached. "Everything okay?" A middle-aged man gestured to his plate. "I don't know what you're doing back there, but it's incredible. I've never tasted anything like it." "Glad you like it," Rudy said, his voice mechanical. "Let me know if there's anything else I can get you." He returned to the kitchen, closing the door behind him. The familiar scent of sizzling meat filled the air, but it no longer brought him comfort. On the counter lay the latest harvest, a creature with translucent skin and a head that resembled a grotesque mix of insect and reptile. Its hollow eyes seemed to follow him as he worked. As Rudy prepared the meat, he couldn't shake the memory of the figure's words. The portal must feed. The first signs of change were subtle. A regular named Beth, a cheerful woman in her 40s, started coming in daily, always ordering the special. At first, Rudy thought nothing of it, but then she began to lose weight, her skin growing pale and translucent, her movements jittery and anxious. "I've been feeling strange lately," she told Rudy one afternoon, her voice trembling. "Like there's something inside me moving." Rudy forced a laugh. "Maybe you just need some rest. Too much stress can do that to you." Beth nodded absently, but Rudy couldn't ignore the way her hands twitched uncontrollably as she reached for her water glass. She wasn't the only one. Other customers began reporting similar symptoms: vivid dreams, strange cravings, the sensation of being watched. Some stopped coming altogether, disappearing without explanation. Rudy told himself it was a coincidence, but the guilt gnawed at him. Then came the incident with Mr. Harmon. The elderly man had been one of Rudy's first success stories, singing the bistro's praises to anyone who would listen. But one evening, as he ate his meal, he suddenly froze. His eyes widened, his hands clutching at his chest as he let out a guttural, choking sound. Rudy rushed to his side, but it was too late. Mr. Harmon collapsed to the floor, his body convulsing violently before going still. The paramedics called it a heart attack, but Rudy knew better. He had seen the faint glow beneath Harmon's skin, the flicker of something unnatural pulsing through his veins. The fissure in the basement had grown larger, its glow now casting an eerie light that seeped through the cracks in the floorboards above. The creatures were coming faster now, more varied and complex. Rudy barely had time to clean the bloodstains before the next one emerged, their cries haunting him long after they had been silenced. He tried to stop. He told himself he wouldn't go back to the basement, that he'd serve regular food, that he'd close the bistro if he had to. But every time, the portal called to him, its hunger a constant pressure in the back of his mind. One night, as he sat alone in the kitchen, the fissure erupted. The light was blinding, the roar deafening as the portal consumed the room. Creatures poured forth in a relentless tide, their forms twisting and writhing as they filled the space. Rudy screamed, his voice lost in the cacophony. And then, in the center of the chaos, the figure returned. "You could not save them," it said, its voice calm amid the storm. "And you cannot save yourself." Rudy fell to his knees, the weight of his failure crushing him. "Please," he begged. "I'll do anything. Just stop this." The figure stepped closer, its fiery eyes piercing through the darkness. "The portal has fed on your greed, your ambition, your hubris. Now it will feed on you." Months later, the diner stood empty. The windows were dark, the sign faded, the door locked. Inside, the tables were covered in dust, the kitchen abandoned. But in the basement, the portal pulsed with life. And somewhere, deep within its depths, Rudy Carver prepared his next dish.